Okay, Bellevue riders, or if you're new to the Bellevue group, I'm going to show a little video, make a little video that would explain what we're trying to accomplish in this thing called a rotating paceline. Now, some of y'all maybe new riders, or maybe you've ridden with us for a while, but you don't fully understand how to do a rotating paceline or what we're talking about when we kind of issue criticisms or issue suggestions. And I thought maybe it would be good to just see this animation, and I'm going to talk through this animation as it goes and stop it and then start it and explain things. And I apologize, I'm not trying to offend anyone. I'm just trying to make it as clear as I can on what we're trying to accomplish. So first of all, I want you to notice as we watch this video, there's going to be actually two lines. There's a line at the bottom and a line at the top. So I'm going to go ahead and play this video, and you can watch this animation start, and you can see that there's a line at the bottom, and those guys are going forward. I'm going to call that the advancing line, and the line at the top I'm going to call the retreating line. And notice that that's a constant fluid motion here. You're always in motion when you're doing this type of rotating pace line. So let me just stop right now and explain to you that it's not by chance that the rotating line is going in this direction. We're going to assume that in this video, we're going to assume that the wind is coming from what would be the north. So if the wind is coming out of the north, then these riders in the top of the line are actually hitting the wind, and the riders in the bottom are sort of protected, if you will, from the wind. And that's really important to understand. You want the line to rotate into the wind. So if the wind is blowing out of the north, on this screen, the bottom line is advancing and the top line is retreating. However, if the wind was blowing from the south, which would be the bottom of the screen, it would be reverse. The top rotating line would be going forward and the bottom would be retreating. And that's important to know, because sometimes, like as we're going south on Bellevue Road and we hit those S curves that are going left and right, sometimes we really need to change the rotation itself. Sometimes somebody at the front of the line needs to just kind of yell out rotating reverse, and then they would actually, even though they rotated up and over, they would rotate back the other direction and kind of maybe spin their hands like this to let the group know, hey, we're going to rotate in the opposite direction. Then when we make another turn and the wind changes, we're going to change the rotation again. Now that's kind of complicated, and if there's a very small section of road that's going to actually be affected by the wind, maybe we just keep rotating the way we're doing to get through that. But certainly when we start a rotating pace line up, we want to be mindful of which direction the wind's coming from. And unless the wind is coming directly at our faces, if it's coming directly in the same direction that we're going into, then we'll always rotate off to the left. And so the advancing line will be on the right side. Other than that, you always rotate into the wind. Okay. So another thing I want to kind of point out as we're watching this animation, I'm going to play through it a couple of different times, but I also want to mention to you that the gaps are close here. You don't see a big gap between the rider's wheels. In fact, they predict, or that they suggest, that your front of your wheel should be about 12 to 14 inches away from the back of the guy's wheel in front of you. So really about 1.5 feet. 12 to 18 inches is all the gap that you want. If this second rider here is letting a gap form, so maybe this rider is not here, he's way back over here, well, what's going to happen is that gap right there has got to be made up. So now this guy here, the guy in the third spot back, he's got to speed up. He's got to accelerate to get back to the wheel. Well, that affects everybody behind him, because if this guy, let's stop it here, if this guy right here accelerates, doesn't this guy have to accelerate? Doesn't this guy have to accelerate? Well, now we've got 1/2 of our line is constantly jumping or surging, and that means all of these guys are losing efficiency. They're all working harder than they should have to work, and that's the opposite of what we want. So notice as you're watching the video that both the top line, or the descending line, and the bottom, which is the ascending line, are both keeping the wheels close together. Okay? Another thing I want to mention as you're watching the video run is notice that the distance between this guy's elbow and this guy's elbow is minimal, right? Okay, sorry about this. Let me get this on. So you don't want a big gap. In other words, when the guy in the front rotates over, he should not end up over here where my cursor is, right? He shouldn't have a huge gap way up here. And maybe he thinks he's doing a good thing because he's being safe, but really he's not. All he's doing is forcing the line to move up farther away from this line down here, which makes it sloppy. You're not catching as much draft if you have a big distance between the top rotating line and the bottom rotating line. If you try to keep it elbow to elbow, everybody wins. Because again, the purpose of this effort is to make everybody go as fast as possible. Okay, now I'm going to go in and continue to play it. And I want you to notice also, over here. So I want you to also notice as these guys are going that there's no surging. There's no surge. Everybody goes up and over nice and smoothly. So let me stop it one more time. I'm going to replay it here. Let's get it going. And I'm going to stop it and talk for just a second here. This is really critically important. So if you don't understand anything else, you've got to understand this point right here. When the advancing line is moving forward, and this guy's responsibility is to take over the lead spot, the natural reaction is, well, okay, let's do this. Let's back up to this guy. So we've got guys 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's all I'm going to talk about. It's these 4 guys. When guy 2 here, this spot here, the protected rider, when he is moving forward, he's getting a great draft. Because remember, the wind is coming from the north here. So like when he was here, he was always protected from the wind. So as he's advancing, he's like, man, this is super easy. I'm not even going very hard. And then as soon as the guy in front of him rotates off, so guy in the lead spot, number 1, rotates over, this guy may mistakenly surge. He may think, well, I want to get up and over quickly because I want to help the group out. But guess what? You just hurt the group. If you surge to get up and over, that's what causes that problem I mentioned a few minutes ago, where everybody else has to surge. So if you notice, what should happen is, as the lead rider, the one rider, as he slips over into this spot, he's going to back off on his pedaling. Hey, I did not say stop pedaling. You didn't hear me say stop. If you stop pedaling, that's a problem because you can drift back into this guy's front wheel and cause a crash where all these guys crash over the top. You can't stop pedaling. What you can do is you can ease up. You can soft pedal. You can go from, let's say that the effort is 240 watts. As we're going through the line, you back off 10 watts. Now, if you don't have a power meter, that's okay. If we think about intensity, if you're at an intensity of 8 as you're moving through, back off to an intensity of 7.5. And so therefore, these guys will slow down just a little bit in speed or intensity. And that allows these guys to, without accelerating, naturally take over that lead spot. So there should be no surging. There should be no increase in speed whatsoever of this bottom line. It should stay the exact same effort and the exact same speed the entire time. Now, another thing I want you to notice is that when this guy rotates up, actually, if you look closely, watch the video again. If you notice, this guy's starting to rotate over before he ever clears the wheel. So when you're going up, when you get close to clearing the wheel, you're going to start easing over. Okay, now I'm going to stop and talk to you for just a minute here. What I just explained about the idea of you easing over, guys, we can't have sudden jerky moves in the Paceline. That's counterproductive and that's dangerous. So you never want to jerk over real fast. You never want to stand when you're in the rotating Paceline. You never want to quickly move over. You never want to let off the pedals abruptly, causing you to de-accelerate. All of those things can lead to a bad crash. On the other hand, if this guy in the front, if he goes all the way up and over in order to be safe, so to speak, that really is a problem because he's creating really a gap, so to speak. What I do is when I've moved about, when my hip is about in line with this guy's arm right here, so I'm like 3/4 of the way past him, I start to slowly slide over, knowing that if this guy does his job, if he's soft pedaling, if he's backing off on the watts like he's supposed to do, by the time my wheel clears, he's going to be behind me, and I'm going to be in exactly the right spot for him to catch the draft off of my wheel. On the other hand, if I go all the way up and over, we call that making a square out of it. If I go all the way up and over, what inevitably happens is this guy right here is left exposed to the wind for too long of a period of time before he can slide over, and he starts to fatigue. Okay, let me stop and talk about this for a minute. Guys, if you can't stay in the rotating pace line at under 80% of your maximum effort, if you're over an 8 out of 10 on your scale of intensity, so to speak, that pace line's too much for you. You need to probably hang out in the back and just watch what's going on and try to stay out of the way, so to speak. Because if you're at 90% or you're at 90% of the required effort, if it takes you 90% to get through the pace line and then up and then back, that's a recipe for you end up either pulling yourself to death where you can't even finish the ride strong, or you end up stalling out where these guys down here, you like stall right here and you can't really move up and over. And so you're like breaking the wind for too long of a period of time. Maybe you end up fading back, which makes everything go bad. And so you really need to be able to rotate in a comfortable heart rate zone in order to be efficient and effective. Now remember, we're going to have a big group starting 2018. So if you can't stay with the A group, the big group is still going to ride hard. The big group is still going to rotate. The big group is still going to pace line. We're going to ride in that big group. If you can't ride like 18 miles an hour average speed, then you're probably still with the wrong group, because the big group is not a no drop ride. What the big group is a way to let those riders that can't quite maintain the intensity of the A group and allow them to form their own group and still have a really effective, efficient pace line and a great workout. The B group's going to go just as far as the A group as far as distance goes. They're just not going to ride with quite the same level of intensity. All right, so showing the animation again, everything is nice and smooth, everything is tight, there's no gaps in the ascending line or the descending line, which I like that a lot. This guy in the very rear here, if you notice, he doesn't fade way back and then over and have to jump or surge to get back up to the wheel. As soon as this guy right here gets far enough ahead, he just slides right over. Okay, now let me stop and talk about a sidebar for a minute. Sometimes you may find yourself in a situation where you can't rotate through at a comfortable intensity. It's a little bit too fast for you. You can stay on the back if you would like. So imagine, if you will, there's another rider right here. You can sort of stay out of the way and let these guys rotate in front of you. But I'm going to warn you, that's a very hard thing to do because you're constantly losing the draft. If you can imagine, let me just back this up again. And so as you watch the animation proceed, you can imagine that if you're in a spot right here, well, you just lost the draft. When this guy slid over, now there's a void here. And now the next guy rotates up, and now there's another void right here. So that's a very hard spot to stay in. It can be done, but it's not easy to do that. If you're going to stay in that spot back there, I would encourage you and ask you to yell out from the back. You're going to yell out, "I'm out." And when you say "I'm out," that means the person drifting back has got to know that he's got to slide over and take that spot, basically. Now, you also need to leave a big enough of a gap that's going to allow that rider to slide over and have room to rotate. Now, guys, here's another thing. All right, and I don't want to be critical. I don't want to sound like a boss, but this is really important. The guys that are trying to do the rotating pace line need you to either be in the pace line or out of the pace line and not in between. In other words, once you make a commitment to start rotating, if you're in this spot and you make a commitment to go through, you can't change your mind right now. You can't change your mind at this position and say, well, I'm not going to rotate through, because that messes everybody else up, and that makes us really, frankly, kind of irritated, because then people have to go around you. That's not safe, and that's not efficient. So if you get in a situation where it's really, really hard for you, please stay in the rotation that one time. And then when you drift back here, you can stay on the back and just not rotate anymore. So anyway, that's what we're after. I'm going to finish this one out. And then I'm actually going to show you another video where I'm not going to talk. I'm just going to let this video play. And I think this will be really helpful for you. Okay, let me minimize this. Give me just a second. And let me pull up my other video. All right, let me maximize this. And just watch this video and kind of keep in mind some of the things that I just talked about.
Keep the two lines close together. When it comes to passing the rider falling back to do your turn on the front, keep close to their side. If you leave a big gap, there'll be a channel of air passing through the middle of the group, which will slow everybody down. Keeping things close together will make things faster for everyone. Follow the wheel ahead closely without overlapping and look down the road past the front of the line. If you're dropping back or it's a single line, look over your shoulder as you drop back to see gaps coming up, and communicate with other riders and listen out for riders talking to you. Keep your front wheel to the side of the person in front of you, and when the last person draws alongside you, start to speed up.
Okay, one thing they said that I completely disagree with. They suggested that you keep your wheel to the side. Guys, we don't want to do that. You want to have your wheel directly behind the guy in front of you. If you start overlapping wheels, and this guy right here, maybe something jumps out of the field here, a deer or a dog, or maybe you're trying to avoid a pothole, and this guy jumps over, just reacts naturally to miss an obstacle, he's going to take your front wheel out. So that's one thing on this video I don't necessarily agree with. I do like how that you can see how fluid this is, and how there are no accelerations, and how close the wheels are together as they proceed through the pace line. In this line, I would assume the wind is blowing from their left here across, from the left to the right, and that's why they're rotating through on the right side. If for some reason the wind was blowing from the right, then actually it would be the left side would be the ones advancing. So let's go ahead and continue the video.
This will save you energy compared to if you wait until they've gone past completely. Keep yourself out of the wind and alter the direction of rotation accordingly. If the wind is coming from your right, then you should be rotating clockwise, and anti-clockwise if the wind is blowing from the left. Regardless of wind direction, riders should always be on the correct side of the road. If you're the most experienced rider in the group, then take the initiative to change the direction of rotation if you go round a corner and the wind is coming from a different side. Communication is a key part of racing smart. Don't hit the pedals hard when you get to the front. The speed should remain the same, and the person pulling off should slow down slightly. Smoother is always faster. Don't ride too hard on climbs if you're the strongest in the group. All this will serve to do is put your fellow riders into the red, and then they'll not be able to contribute once.
Okay, I am going to stop and talk about this for a minute, guys. This is also critical for us. You don't want to think about it like the speed is going to stay the same during the entire effort. It's not the speed that stays the same, it's the intensity. So if you're going up a little bit of rise, now when we get to big climbs, if we go up to a major climb, like let's say Savoy Hill or even Wheeler Hill, guys, we're not trying to rotate while we're going up those climbs. That's when we want the strong riders. That's you, Jason Jenkins. That's you, Mike McCutcheon. That's you, Chris Manny, or Jeremy Duckworth, or Ben Gibson. Whoever you are, you know who the strong riders are, right? The really good climbers. Edwin Flores. the guys that are good climbers, we want them to sort of just go to the front on a climb and just set the tempo that will help everybody. Unless they want to attack. If they want to attack and try to break everything apart, they can. All bets are off on climbs, essentially. We're trying to do a rotating pace line when it's basically flat, but you are going to have times when you go uphill just a little bit. And when that happens, we want the line to basically slow down some. We want the intensity of the effort to slow down some in order to keep everybody in a comfortable zone and not too fast or too hard and get their heart rate elevated. If you try to keep the exact same speed, you're going to get to a surging situation, and that's what we don't want. So when we hit a climb or a rise in elevation, just kind of back off the intensity a little bit in order to keep everybody together and everybody smooth. Again, you know you're doing it right if there are no surges in the pace line. If you're having to surge or seeing other people surge, if you're seeing gaps form between wheels as you're drifting back or as you're moving forward, then everything is jacked up. That's what we do. No gaps between wheels. 18 inches to 12 to 18 inches. If that's happening, we're doing a perfect job.
The road flattens again. Good communication is key to riding through and off. Keep it tight, don't let gaps appear, and encourage other riders in the line. Normal group etiquette remains. Point out and verbally alert the others in the group if you see any holes or other hazards coming up. If you simply cannot do another turn, then it is okay to temporarily sit on the back to recover, but make sure that you alert the riders of what you're doing. Simply say "hup" so that they know that you're not coming through. Why is it called a chain gang? Well, because one line effectively moves forward whilst the other line moves backwards, a little bit like a chain on a bike.
The thrill of riding in a...
Okay, so that's kind of wraps up the video. I hope this was informative. I hope this was helpful. And most importantly, I hope this was not offensive to anyone. We don't want you to be offended. We don't want you to, if we suggest that you take a look at the video, to feel like you're stupid or that you're not trying or whatever. We just, as the Bellevue group has progressed, as we've gotten stronger and as we've gotten better, it's mandated that we ride differently. And guys want the group to be strong, but they want the group to be fast and they want the group to be efficient. And this is something that's helping toward that end. I remember that when I first transitioned back to Bellevue riding from down in Fayetteville, riding World Championships, it was just amazing to me how sort of inefficient we were as a group. And in the last 3 years, we've just gotten so much better. But because we're getting better and because more people are hearing about us, we're getting more people join us. I mean, gosh, we've got a guy that drives in from Joplin, Missouri just to do our rides. And we always have people coming in from Bentonville or coming up from Fayetteville. And we want those people that come in to have a good experience. And part of that good experience is trying to get people that are new to our group to better understand how to do a rotating pace line. And let me tell you, when it happens correctly, when we do this right and when you get to where you're comfortable in that rotating pace line, we will achieve speeds that you've never seen before. We can run 24 or 25 miles an hour if there's no wind and it's flat and you feel like, man, I'm not even working that hard. And that's simply because you're getting the maximum benefit of the draft from the people around you. Now, I will say this finally. If our group is more than about 20, that's really getting too big to do this. So if we have 25 or 30 guys in a group, that's really too big, and we'll have to kind of modify what we're doing and go to a different sort of rotating effort where 2 guys are in the front and they peel off on either side or something like that. I don't know. We'd do something different. But really this is most efficient or most effective with, I would say, groups of maybe over 8 to around 15. Even 19 and 20 is getting a little bit on the big side. So I think with the new AB groups forming in the spring, the rotating paceline effort is going to be a kind of a method of operation that happens almost all the time. And so if somebody calls it out or they spin their hands like this, that means the rotating paceline is about to get started. And we want it to start kind of from the front, not from the back. So hopefully that video was helpful. Hopefully I didn't talk you to death. The video is only about 24 minutes long, so I'm going to stop here before I lose your attention. Have a great day, and let's go ride bikes.